Thank you, Shalom. How can one preach after that? I mean, they just sung us right into heaven. Let's bow our heads. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, our God and our salvation. And again, my prayer is that you will speak either through me or in spite of me, but that we will hear the words of life. Amen. My sermon title this afternoon is based on the reading of James, the first chapter of this letter. And the title is From Victims to Victors. From Victims to Victors. Robert Schuller used to say, tough times never last, but tough people do. I wonder if you can say it after me. Everyone loudly. Tough times never last. Say it with me. Tough times never last, but tough people do. And can I ask you to say that to the person next to you? But add this. Say it and say to the person next to you, tough times never last, but tough people do. You are tough. Can we try that? 1, 2, 3. Say it to your friend. Tough times never last, but tough people do. You are tough. Why am I saying that? Do you realize that everything that has happened to you in your lifetime has prepared you for whatever will happen to you tomorrow? Everything that has happened to you during your whole lifetime has prepared you to what lies ahead. There's no surprises. God has made you ready for that. You have accumulated so many life experiences and tests that whatever will happen tomorrow, you will be prepared. You will be tough enough, even though you might not feel it. And this is the basic message of James. James is a wonderful letter. Søren Kierkegaard loved this letter, the philosopher. Luther, on the other hand, didn't really like James. Well, they say that women find James, the letter, very appealing. They understand the letter, while men don't really understand it that well. It's very practical. It's a Starbucks coffee shop letter. The way that James writes this letter is interesting. He opens this letter. Now, scholars tell us that James is the brother of Jesus. But he opens this letter in a fantastic way. He says, James, I am a slave of God and the Master Jesus, writing to the 12 tribes scattered to kingdom come. Hello. James uses very informal language. He could have done some name dropping and said, well, it's James, the brother of Jesus, but he doesn't do that. He says, James, with Jesus as his master. And then he uses a word for his greeting that's not very Christian. It's secular. It's like you and I, when we meet each other down the street, say hi, hello. There's an informal setting to this letter. It is as if James is inviting this whole diaspora of people into the coffee shop and having a cup of coffee and then talk very deeply, one-on-one. He's dealing with life, practical life matters. He's dealing with things like trials and tribulations and tests, bad news. He's dealing with good news. He's dealing with the day-to-day practicalities of faith. We are people of faith. Faith is binding us together. We are people of faith because we believe God. We have chosen to believe God. So James is coming and is addressing those practical things. His main message is a message of victory. He wants to tell those people in the diaspora, he's a Jew writing to Jews. He's telling those people who were scattered right through the world, not because they wanted to, because they had to go. They had to go out of their country. Most of them lost everything. So he's talking to them, and he's very frank. He's cutting to the chase. But he wants them to know three things. He wants them to know that their trials can turn into triumphs. He's giving them hope. He wants them to know that their hurts can turn into halos. He wants them to know that they can turn from victims to victors. It's a book of hope. How do you do that? How is it possible to come to this conclusion with all the trials and all the tribulations and all the things they had to face in their lifetime, much more than what you and I can imagine? So the first few verses of this letter are quite revealing. He opens with a greeting, with a salutation, and then the next verse is right down to the man, right down to the point, and he tells them, consider it a sheer gift, my friends, when tests and challenges come at you from all sides. His first point in slang language is actually, brothers and sisters, life sucks. He tells them, this world where you are in, maybe you ask the question, oh, my life is difficult and I have to face all these difficulties. When will it end? Will it ever end? And James says, no. No, it won't. Tomorrow you will have to face trials. And then maybe it goes better for a time, and then you have to face another trial. In this life, Jesus says, you will have trouble. You will have tribulations. Brothers and sisters, James says life sucks. It's very radical. You see, trials and tribulations, tests, well, that's not an elective, it's a required course in your life and my life. And actually, he wants to tell us, make peace with that. Make peace with that. He uses very interesting words. The one word that he's using is perpipto. It's a word that means when you are surrounded, enveloped by troubles. Surrounded. And the picture that I have in my mind when I read this word is this animal that's surrounded by a pack of hyenas or a pack of wolves. He's threatened. He's surrounded by those things. And he talks about trials and tribulations, those things that are so unexpectedly, so uninviting in our lives. It comes. One day you get up, and then the next moment during your day you go to your office or wherever you work. The next moment it's like a pack of wolves. You're surrounded by all these trials and all these tribulations and all these things that just happen to you. They're so uninvited. You didn't ask for it. It just happens. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. Maybe you have had some experience this past week. Maybe you can nod your head and say, yes, I know that. And this pack of wolves, he gives them a name, and the Greek name is perasmos. It means those things that puts us in the fire. It tests us. It tests your ability to do things, your ability to live, your ability to function. It's from all sides. Trials. Fire. Right into the fire. It's not particularly, I think, that God is sitting there and he's got a new test for you and me every time and say, well, I think you've had it too easy now. Let me give you a new one. No, I don't think it's that. But God knows when we fall into these traps and these uninvited, these periods of uninvited trials and tribulations, whatever it might be. God is not taken by surprise. He uses that. He uses that. And with every trial, every tribulation that you and I face every day, he is making us ready for the next one, for every new step. That's why I said in the beginning, everything that has happened in your life up till now has prepared you for what will happen tomorrow, even though you and I might not feel it. That's why we say to one another that tough times never last. It will go over. Tough people do. We are in the school, becoming tough. The second thing that James wants us to know is this. He says, consider it. Consider it a sheer gift. Well, this is quite strange. He says, look at these trials and these things that are happening in your life and consider them as gifts. Well, I think I can do without that, don't you? I really don't like that kind of gifts. But the treasure is inside. The Phillips translation is so beautiful. It says, when all kinds of trials and temptations crowd into your lives, my brothers, don't resent them as intruders, but welcome them as friends. Again, I think I can do without those friends, but those are necessary. You see, it's a matter of perspective. He uses a very beautiful Greek word there as well, where he says, the word consider. It means you have to make a choice. It's not something that comes natural. Therefore, it's not a natural reaction. It's totally unnatural for you and I to see or to look at a trial coming our ways, because it involves emotion, it involves pain, it involves life choices, it involves changes in our lives. But what he's saying is, consider the price. Make a choice. It is a choice point in your life and my life that we look at this, and he's using the aorist imperative in the Greek. It means that he's very serious about it. He tells those people that suffer so much, who is right all over the world. They abandoned from their homeland. They really had a tough time. He tells them, you make the choice. You have no choice but making a choice. And the choice is change your perspective. Change your perspective. He says, count it joy. That's not easy. That's not easy. The natural is to be a victim. The natural reaction is that when things are happening in my life where I've got no control about, that I am a victim. And being a victim it's just natural. But he says, make a choice. Look at these things that are happening around you. Look at them as a gift. As a gift, an investment that is going to change you. Brothers and sisters, we will not change unless we are forced to change. The older you get, the older I get, the less I want to change. I hate change. I love what I'm doing, and I love my routine, and I love the things that are around me, and it really takes a bomb to change me. And the same here. He says, well, you have to make the choice. There's something in this box. There's something in this box, and you have to open it. You have to discover it. And so he goes on to a third thing. If I change my mind, if I get to the point, the choice point, he says, don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Don't try to get out of it before it has done its job. The Message is so beautiful, the Message translation. He says, consider it a sheer gift, friends, when tests and challenges come at you from all sides. You know that under pressure, your faith life is forced into the open and shows its true colors. So don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work. Let it do its work. What is this work? He says, well, this work, faith produces patience. The word in the Greek is hypomone. Hypomone means fighting resilience. It's the word that is used for an athlete who is training for a marathon. I don't know whom of you are runners, but oh my goodness, if you start jogging, that first kilometer is hell. And you have to do it every day. And every day a bit further. And every kilometer prepares you for another kilometer. It builds up resilience. It builds up strength even though you might not feel it. He says, let it do its work. Winston Churchill, it is said of him that he took 3 years to get through his 8th grade. And then the problem that he had most, the subject that he had most trouble with passing was English. And so we know his story. And it is said that 1 year after he has become the Prime Minister, Oxford University asked him to address its students and body of lecturers and officials at one of their commencement ceremonies. And they said Churchill arrived there with his usual props, with a cigar, with a cane, and with his hat. So when it was his turn, he approached the podium and the crowd rose in appreciative applause to him. They sat down, they settled down, and he removed his cigar, placing the top hat on the podium, and then he gazed at his audience. You can just imagine Churchill gazing at his audience, and they waited in anticipation. What is he going to say? And in his drowning voice, he said, "Never give up." And then he was quiet. And after a pause, he raised on his toes and he repeated, "Never give up. Never give up." And again a pause. And then for a third time, he blasted it out in his deep voice and he said, "Never, never, never, never give up." And he took his hat and his cigar and his cane and he left the podium. His commencement address was finished. And this is what James wants us to know. Never give up. Because this is doing something in your life. There's another illustration. It's about a pastor in a small church, and he had a couple, a man and his wife, late in their years. And things went bad for them. The lady had a stroke and her husband he had gone blind. And over the few weeks, her husband's health rapidly deteriorated and he was admitted to a hospice. The pastor of the church went to visit them and he assured this lady and her husband that he was praying for them. And then the wife asked a question that took him by surprise. She said to him, "So what are you asking God to do?" And he replied, "Well, that God may help and strengthen you." And then she said something really interesting. She said to him, "I appreciate that, but pray about one more thing. Pray that I'll have the wisdom not to waste all of this." Don't let the trial, don't let that bad time in your life go wasted. God is busy doing something in your life. Let him finish that. How will you get through it? The last point. Well, he says a beautiful thing also in the message. He says, if you don't know what you're doing, pray. If you don't know what you're doing, pray, and pray for wisdom. Don't pray to get out of it. Don't pray to get a side exit for this. Pray for wisdom to get through this, because that's going to change you. Through it. If I read the Psalms, in all the Psalms, if you make a study of the Psalms is pertinent about that we will have trials and troubles and bad things happening to us, but we get through that, through the valleys. This wisdom, the only thing that I could think of, a metaphor for this wisdom, is a GPS, a navigation. Pray that God will navigate you through this. I don't know about you, but when I was younger, we did not have navigation. We had a map. I have no idea how I would survive in Seoul with a map. I need a navigation. And when I'm driving, my one eye is on the navigation, my other eye is on the traffic, and I'm trying to navigate through this through this mess of traffic and turn right here and then turn right there, and when you turn right, you hold to the left-hand side. That's quite confusing. The same with this. Tune in God's navigation. I want to end with an illustration. Robert Schuller said, "Tough times never last, but tough people do." There was a school, and the children were lined up in a school hall for lunch. At the head of the table, now you know when school kids line up for lunch at a summer camp or somewhere, it's chaos. But on the head of the table was a large pile of apples. And the teacher made a note. "Take only one, God is watching." On the other end of the table, there were a large pile of chocolate chip cookies. So a little boy had a written note there, and it read, "Take all you want, God's watching the apples." Unlike that, God is watching the apples and the cookies. What I want to say to you is this: God is not taken by surprise when things go wrong in our lives. He does not take him by surprise. His eye is on the sparrow. And therefore, take hope. Take James' message and say to yourself, tough times never last, but tough people do. I am tough.